Every day across America, elderly citizens check their email and find something that makes their heart skip a beat. A charge they never made, a purchase they never authorized, their life savings suddenly at risk. What happens next changes everything. This is the story of how organized criminal networks in India are systematically targeting American seniors, stealing not just their money, but their sense of security, their trust, and sometimes their will to live. But it's also the story of one cybersecurity expert who decided to fight back, using the scammers' own weapons against them. The numbers are staggering. According to the Federal Trade Commission, there were around 900,000 reports of identity theft in 2022 alone. But behind each number is a real person, a real family, and real devastation that ripples through entire communities. Meet Stephen, a cybersecurity researcher who has been tracking these criminal operations for months. Through careful investigation and technical skills, he has gained unprecedented access to the inner workings of these scam centers. What he discovered is a sophisticated criminal enterprise that operates with military precision, targeting the most vulnerable members of our society. The scam always begins the same way. An email appears in an elderly person's inbox. It looks official, professional, trustworthy. The message is urgent but simple. $82.99 has been charged to their account. To cancel, they just need to call a phone number. For someone on a fixed income, $83 represents groceries for a week, medicine they need, money they simply cannot afford to lose. So they call, hoping to resolve what seems like a simple billing error. On the other end of that phone call is a young man in Kolkata, India. His name might be Nick, he says, though that's certainly not his real name. He speaks English well, with just enough of an accent to seem foreign, but not so much as to be incomprehensible. He's been trained to sound helpful, professional, concerned about the caller's financial well-being. The caller explains they never made this purchase. They don't even have a PayPal account. They say, how could someone charge them for something when they don't even use that service? Nick understands completely. This happens all the time, he explains. Hackers have broken into their account. Their personal information has been compromised. But don't worry, he can help. He can cancel all these fraudulent charges and even issue a full refund. All they need to do is let him connect to their computer so he can process the refund directly. For many people, this is where the scam falls apart. They recognize something isn't right. They hang up. They report the call to authorities. They warn their friends and family. But for others, particularly elderly Americans who grew up in an era when customer service representatives were helpful and trustworthy, this sounds reasonable. If their bank account has been compromised, they want it fixed immediately. If someone can help them get their money back, they're grateful for the assistance. This is where the real crime begins. Nick guides them through downloading software called AnyDesk or TeamViewer. These are legitimate programs used by technical support teams worldwide, but in the hands of criminals, they become weapons. Once installed, these programs give Nick complete control over the victim's computer. He can see everything they see, click anything they click, and most importantly, watch as they log into their online banking. Think about what this moment represents for the victim. They're sitting in their living room, maybe the same room where they've paid bills for decades. They're looking at their computer screen, following instructions from someone they believe is helping them. They type in their banking password, the same password they've used for years, never imagining that a stranger on the other side of the world is watching every keystroke. Nick can now see their bank account, their savings, their checking account, perhaps their retirement funds. A lifetime of work, sacrifice, and careful financial planning spread across the screen. For many elderly Americans, these numbers represent everything they have. Money saved for medical emergencies, funds set aside for their children's inheritance, their financial security in their most vulnerable years. But Nick isn't looking at this account to help them. He's calculating how much he can steal. The next part of the scam is psychological manipulation at its most cruel. Nick tells the victim he's going to process their refund. He asks them to look away from the screen for a moment while he handles the technical details. What he's actually doing is editing the HTML code of their banking website. He's changing the numbers on their screen to make it appear that money has been deposited into their account. When the victim looks back at their screen, they see something that fills them with relief and gratitude. Not only has the original charge been cancelled, but they've received a refund. $1,500, $3,000, sometimes even more. They think their problem has been solved. They think this helpful customer service representative has not only fixed their issue but given them extra money in the process. Then Nick delivers the crushing blow. He's made a terrible mistake. he says. His voice now sounds panicked, worried. He was supposed to refund them $1,500, but he accidentally typed an extra zero. Or he was supposed to refund them $300, but he typed $3,000 instead. The victim looks at their screen and sees exactly what he's describing. The numbers are right there, showing far more money than they were supposed to receive. But here's the cruel reality. No money has actually been deposited into their account. The numbers on their screen are fake, created by Nick's manipulation of the website's display code. Their actual bank balance hasn't changed at all, but they don't know this. They believe they've received thousands of dollars that don't belong to them. Nick explains that he could lose his job over this mistake. His supervisor might fire him, his family could lose their income, all because he accidentally gave the victim too much money. But there's a solution. He says, if the victim can just send back the extra money, everything will be fine, nobody will get in trouble. The mistake will be corrected. For many elderly Americans, this triggers a deep sense of moral obligation. They don't want to keep money that isn't theirs. They don't want an innocent person to lose their job because of an honest mistake. They want to do the right thing. Nick then guides them through the process of returning the money. He tells them to go to their bank and withdraw the excess amount in cash. But he warns them about something important. If they tell the bank tellers the truth about why they're withdrawing the money, the bank will charge them extra fees, commercial taxes, he calls them 10% additional charges for business transactions. So he coaches them to lie. Tell the bank you're buying a car, he suggests. Say it's for personal expenses. Don't mention anything about refunds or companies or phone calls. Just withdraw the money and say it's for personal use. This instruction reveals the sophisticated psychology behind these scams. Bank tellers are trained to recognize potential fraud. They know that elderly customers withdrawing large amounts of cash are often being scammed. They'll ask questions. They'll try to verify the withdrawal is legitimate. They might even refuse to process the transaction if they suspect fraud. But Nick has anticipated this. By coaching victims to lie about their intentions, he's removing the final safety net designed to protect them. Think about what this moment represents for the victim. They're standing in a bank they've trusted for years, perhaps decades. The teller behind the counter might know them by name. They've done business here through marriages, divorces, home purchases, retirements. This place represents financial security and trust in their community. Now they're being asked to lie to these people who have served them faithfully. They're being asked to deceive the very institutions designed to protect their financial well-being. For many elderly people, this goes against everything they were taught about honesty and integrity. But they believe they're correcting an honest mistake. They believe they're helping someone keep their job. They believe they're doing the right thing. So they lie. They withdraw $5,000, $10,000, sometimes $15,000 or more. They tell the bank teller they're buying a car, or making home improvements, or helping a family member. The teller processes the transaction, perhaps with some concern, but ultimately trusting their long-time customer. The victim leaves the bank with an envelope full of cash, money that represents months or years of Social Security payments, funds they had set aside for medical emergencies or home repairs, money they had planned to leave to their children or grandchildren. They're carrying it because they believe they're returning money that was given to them by mistake. Nick then instructs them on how to convert this cash into gift cards. Target gift cards, Apple gift cards, Google Play cards. He sends them to multiple stores to avoid suspicion. Buy $500 worth at each location. He tells them, if anyone asks, say they're gifts for family members. Again, the victim finds themselves lying to people in their community, store clerks who might recognize them, cashiers who see them regularly. They're purchasing thousands of dollars in gift cards and making up stories about why they need them. Each lie chips away at their sense of self, their integrity, their connection to their community. Once they have the gift cards, Nick instructs them to scratch off the silver coating on the back and read him the numbers over the phone. These numbers are like cash to the scammers. Once Nick has them, he can immediately convert the gift card value into cryptocurrency or transfer the funds to accounts around the world. The money's gone instantly, irrecoverably. Only then does the victim realize what has happened. When they log into their real bank account later, they see that no refund was ever deposited. The numbers they saw on their screen were fake. The helpful customer service representative was a criminal. The mistake they thought they were correcting never existed. The emotional impact of this realization cannot be overstated. The shame is overwhelming. How could I have been so stupid? They ask themselves, how could I have fallen for something so obvious? The self-blame is relentless and destructive. Many victims become depressed, isolated, afraid to trust anyone or anything again. But the impact extends far beyond the immediate victim. Adult children discover that their parents have been scammed out of money that was meant to help pay for medical care or long-term care needs. Retirement plans are destroyed. Inheritances evaporate. Families face financial crises they never anticipated. Some elderly victims become so ashamed of being scammed that they hide it from their families. They skip meals to stretch their remaining money. They don't fill prescriptions they can't afford. They suffer in silence. Too embarrassed to ask for help. Too proud to admit they were deceived. This is exactly what happened to one elderly woman who received a call about a charge to her PayPal account. She followed all the steps. She downloaded the software. She let the scammer connect to her computer. She watched as he showed her the fake refund on her screen. She believed his story about making a mistake. She was prepared to go to a bank and withdraw $11,000. $11,000 that represented a significant portion of her life savings. Money she had saved for emergencies, for medical expenses, for her final years when she might need care she couldn't provide for herself. But this story has a different ending, because someone was watching. Stephen, the cybersecurity researcher, had been monitoring this particular scam operation for weeks. He had gained access to their computer systems. He could see their webcams. He could watch them work. He could hear their phone calls in real time. When he heard the scammer instructing this elderly woman to withdraw $11,000, he knew he had to act. He picked up his phone and called her directly. The conversation was brief but life-changing. Stephen identified himself and told her that the person she'd been speaking with was not from PayPal. He was a criminal trying to steal her money. The refund she thought she had received was fake. The money showing on her screen wasn't real. The relief in her voice was immediate and heartbreaking. She had been just minutes away from going to her bank. She had been ready to withdraw $11,000 and convert it to gift cards for someone she'd never met. In that moment, Stephen's intervention saved not just her money, but potentially her life. For many elderly victims of these scams, the financial loss is so devastating that they never recover. Some develop serious health problems from the stress. Others lose their homes. Some take their own lives. But Stephen's work goes beyond just interrupting individual scams. He has been systematically investigating the criminal organizations behind these operations. Using sophisticated hacking techniques, he has gained access to the scammers' computers and networks. He has downloaded their files, their personal photos, their identification documents. He knows who they are, where they work, and how they operate. They're part of organized networks that operate like legitimate businesses. They have office buildings, supervisors, training programs, and daily quotas. They share lead lists of potential victims. They coordinate their activities across multiple time zones. The scammers work primarily from hotels and apartment complexes in specific neighborhoods of Kolkata. They use fake names and phone numbers that change regularly. They create professional-looking websites that mimic legitimate companies. They have scripts and training materials that teach them exactly what to say to overcome victim resistance. Many of these criminals are young men in their 20s and 30s. They come from middle-class backgrounds and have college educations. They speak multiple languages and have technical skills that could be used for legitimate purposes. But they've chosen to use their abilities to prey on vulnerable elderly people in another country. The money they steal doesn't stay in India. It's laundered through complex networks that involve cryptocurrency exchanges, money transfer services, and offshore bank accounts. Some of it eventually makes its way back to fund other criminal activities. Some of it disappears into the global shadow economy that exists parallel to legitimate financial systems. Stephen decided to confront one of these scammers directly, using information he had gathered from their computer systems. He was able to identify the exact location where one particular scammer was working. He had the street address, the building layout, even real-time access to the scammer's webcam. During an active call where the scammer was trying to defraud another victim, Stephen called the scammer's phone number. The conversation that followed was remarkable for its revelation of how these criminals operate. Stephen immediately demonstrated that he knew exactly where the scammer was located. He described the street, the nearby buildings, even the fitness gym next door. He showed that he had access to the scammer's computer and could see him through his own webcam. The scammer's reaction was immediate panic. When confronted with evidence of his exact location and identity, he tried to disconnect from the internet and shut down his computer. But Stephen had already downloaded everything he needed. Personal photos, identification documents, email addresses, phone numbers, a complete digital dossier of the criminal who had been stealing from elderly Americans. This direct confrontation represents a new phase in the fight against these criminal organizations. For too long, these scammers have operated with complete impunity. They've hidden behind international borders, fake identities, and the anonymity of the internet, they've believed that their victims would never be able to identify them or hold them accountable. But Stephen's work proves that these criminals are not as anonymous as they believe. Their computer systems can be penetrated, their identities can be discovered, their locations can be pinpointed, the same technology they use to commit crimes can be turned against them. The broader implications of this work are significant. Law enforcement agencies around the world struggle to investigate and prosecute these international fraud schemes. The criminals operate across borders, use constantly changing identities, and exploit gaps between different legal systems. Traditional investigative techniques often fail because the evidence is digital. The criminals are technically sophisticated, and the jurisdictional issues are complex. But cybersecurity researchers like Stephen can operate more quickly and flexibly than traditional law enforcement. They can penetrate criminal networks, gather evidence, and disrupt operations in real time. They can identify specific individuals and provide law enforcement with actionable intelligence. Stephen has been sharing his findings with appropriate authorities, including phone companies that can shut down the fake numbers used by scammers, and websites that can block the domains used in fraudulent operations. He's provided evidence to international law enforcement agencies and helped them understand how these criminal networks operate. He's also worked with companies like Paxful, a cryptocurrency exchange that scammers often use to launder their stolen money. By providing specific account information and transaction details, he's helped these companies identify and shut down accounts used for criminal purposes. But the fight against these scams requires more than just technical solutions. It requires education and awareness. Many potential victims simply don't understand how sophisticated these scams have become. They're still thinking about fraud in terms of obvious email misspellings and clearly fake websites. They don't realize that modern scammers can create convincing replicas of legitimate company communications and use social engineering techniques that would fool even technically savvy individuals. The elderly are particularly vulnerable because they grew up in an era when customer service representatives were generally trustworthy and helpful. The idea that someone claiming to be from a legitimate company would be trying to steal their money is foreign to their experience. They're also more likely to be isolated from family and friends who might recognize the warning signs of a scam in progress. Financial institutions have a crucial role to play in protecting their customers. Bank tellers need better training to recognize the signs of elder fraud. They need to be empowered to ask questions when elderly customers make unusual withdrawals, even if those customers seem resistant to inquiry. They need protocols for contacting family members or adult protective services when they suspect a customer is being scammed. Technology companies also bear responsibility for the platforms and services that enable these crimes. Phone companies need to do more to prevent spoofing of caller ID information. Email providers need better filters to catch fraudulent messages before they reach potential victims. Social media platforms need to monitor for scam operations and shut them down more quickly. But perhaps most importantly, families need to have conversations about these risks before they become problems. Adult children need to talk with their elderly parents about how these scams work and what warning signs to watch for. They need to establish communication protocols so that parents feel comfortable calling for advice before making financial decisions in response to unexpected phone calls or emails. These conversations are difficult because they touch on sensitive issues of independence and competence. No elderly person wants to feel like their adult children don't trust their judgment. A simple rule that any request for money transfers, gift card purchases, or unusual bank withdrawals gets verified through a separate communication channel can prevent most of these scams from succeeding. If someone calls claiming to be from a legitimate company, the potential victim should hang up and call the company's official customer service number to verify the request. The work that Stephen and other cybersecurity researchers are doing provides hope that these criminal networks can be disrupted and their members held accountable. By penetrating their computer systems and gathering evidence of their operations, these researchers are making it possible for law enforcement to take action against specific individuals rather than just shutting down temporary phone numbers or websites. The psychological impact on the scammers of being directly confronted with evidence of their crimes is also significant. Many of these criminals have convinced themselves that they're not really hurting anyone, or that their victims can afford the losses, or that what they're doing isn't really stealing. Being confronted with the reality of their actions and the certainty that they can be identified and located disrupts these self-justifications. When Stephen showed the scammer his own webcam feed and described his exact location, the criminal's immediate panic response revealed how vulnerable these operations really are. Despite their technical sophistication, these criminals are operating illegally and they know it. They're afraid of being caught and held accountable for their actions. This fear can be a powerful deterrent if it becomes widespread among criminal networks. If scammers begin to believe that their operations can be penetrated and their identities discovered, many may choose to find legitimate employment instead of risking criminal prosecution. The financial industry is also beginning to respond more aggressively to these threats. Banks are implementing new monitoring systems that can detect unusual patterns of activity that might indicate a customer is being scammed. They're training employees to recognize the warning signs and to intervene when appropriate. Some institutions are even implementing waiting periods for large cash withdrawals by elderly customers, giving families time to verify that the transactions are legitimate. Gift card retailers are also taking steps to prevent their products from being used in scams. Many stores now have signs warning customers about gift card scams and training employees to ask questions when customers purchase large amounts of gift cards. Some retailers have implemented limits on gift card purchases or require additional verification for large transactions. Law enforcement agencies are developing new approaches to international cooperation in fighting these crimes. While it's still difficult to prosecute individual scammers who operate from other countries, agencies are working together to share intelligence and coordinate operations against major criminal networks. For Stephen, this work represents more than just a technical challenge or a way to demonstrate cybersecurity skills. It's a personal mission to protect vulnerable people from sophisticated criminals who are exploiting their trust and generosity for profit. The $11,000 that this woman almost lost represents something different to each party involved. To the scammer, it was just another successful transaction, money to be split with his criminal associates and used to fund their operation. To the victim, it was a significant portion of her life savings, money she needed for her security and care in her remaining years. But to Stephen, it represented something else entirely. It was a human being who deserved protection from criminals who had chosen to prey on the elderly and vulnerable. It was a reminder that behind every statistic about fraud and identity theft is a real person whose life can be destroyed by these crimes. The technology that makes these scams possible also makes it possible to fight back against them. The same internet connections that allow criminals to operate across international borders also allow cybersecurity researchers to penetrate their networks and gather evidence of their activities. The same computer systems that criminals use to store their data can be accessed, and that data can be used to identify and locate them. This represents a new frontier in the fight against international fraud. Traditional law enforcement methods, while still important, are often too slow and limited to keep pace with rapidly evolving criminal techniques. But cybersecurity researchers can adapt quickly and use the criminals' own tools and methods against them. The confrontation between Stephen and the scammer reveals the psychological dynamics that make this work effective. When the scammer realized that his location had been identified and his computer had been penetrated, his immediate response was panic and flight. The anonymity and distance that had made him feel safe suddenly disappeared. This reaction suggests that many of these criminals are not as committed to their illegal activities as they might appear. When faced with the real possibility of being identified and prosecuted, they choose to flee rather than fight. This vulnerability can be exploited by making it clear to criminal networks that their operations are being monitored and their members can be identified. The broader lesson from this story is that the fight against these scams requires a combination of technical expertise, law enforcement cooperation, industry responsibility, and public education. No single approach is sufficient to address the full scope of the problem, but together these efforts can significantly reduce the success rate of these criminal operations for families dealing with elderly relatives who might be vulnerable to these scams. The most important step is open communication about the risks and warning signs. These conversations should happen before any suspicious contact occurs, when there's no immediate pressure or urgency involved. The goal is not to make elderly people afraid of all technology or suspicious of all customer service contacts. The goal is to give them the knowledge and tools they need to distinguish between legitimate communications and criminal attempts to steal their money. The work that Stephen has done provides a model for how cybersecurity professionals can contribute to this fight. By using their technical skills to penetrate criminal networks and gather evidence, they can provide law enforcement with the intelligence needed to take action against specific individuals and organizations. The woman who almost lost $11,000 to these scammers will probably never know the full extent of what Stephen's intervention meant for her life. She knows that she avoided a financial loss that would have been devastating, but she may not realize that she also avoided the psychological trauma that destroys many scam victims, the shame and self-blame and loss of confidence that can be as damaging as the financial loss itself. Her story represents hope for all the other potential victims who are receiving fraudulent emails and phone calls every day. It shows that these crimes can be stopped, that the criminals can be identified and confronted, and that vulnerable people can be protected from sophisticated criminal operations. The fight against these scams will continue as long as there are criminals willing to exploit vulnerable people for profit. But stories like this one prove that the criminals are not as powerful or untouchable as they might seem. With the right combination of technical skills, moral commitment, and willingness to act, individuals can make a real difference in protecting their communities from these threats.